Hello.
Hello and welcome to the show. Anthony joining me. How are you, Anthony?
Good, Andrew. Thanks for having me back again. Good to be here.
You're very welcome. And we're going to start at the two friendlies that have been played since the weekend. Well, the first one was on Saturday night, I think, and the second one was today. Anthony watched the first one in full. I only saw it in parts, but I watched the full one tonight. So I'm going to let Anthony run through the first one for you.
Cool. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Andrew. So the first friendly, it was good to see us get a real proper test in our first match. A lot of people don't realize Lugano actually had quite a good season in the Swiss Championship last season. So they entered the preseason on a pretty high note, and not to mention their season domestically actually starts a bit sooner than ours. So they were a lot fresher than us, and they were moving the ball quite quickly. So it was good to see us adapt to their tenacity and their pace throughout the match and get some great goals. I think Martinez was fantastic from the get-go, and he'll be the main name on everybody's lips. But I really, really liked and enjoyed seeing Jan Cattermole come back on again. I thought last season he was a little bit restricted for minutes by Spalletti, and I think that on a few different occasions he should have been given some more preference. And hopefully this season we see him get a fair bit more time on the right. I know we've brought in Matteo Politano. He's a more versatile forward, and I thought he was our standout player against Lugano, though, to be honest. I thought he looked very confident, very complacent, and he was also able to communicate with our new signings very well. So that would have been the biggest compliment from the first match, was being able to see our newer signings in Politano, Nainggolan, and Martinez link up quite crisply for that first goal. I thought it was very nice. And I think Asamoah had a great game as well. And from what I've read very briefly on the reviews of this morning's friendly, it sounded like Asamoah was one of our standout performers again. So overall, it was a fantastic kickoff to the preseason against Lugano. But unfortunately, I awoke quite early this morning to a more negative scoreline. You want to talk us through this morning's match, Andrew?
Yeah, was this evening where I am in Ireland. It was a poor performance. It was very flat. The players looked very sluggish. Cattermole was probably the sort of standout player. He looks like he offers more than just being a winger. He looks like he could also operate as a centre forward, which is beneficial. I wouldn't worry about it too much because we've only sort of come back to pre-season training just over a week ago. And Sean, very similar to Lugano, are starting the Swiss Super League Championship this coming weekend. So they're really sort of at the end stage of their pre-season. Obviously, when the season is up and running, you would be hoping to beat teams like Sion and Lugano quite comfortably. If we were to come across them, we won't this year because neither of them qualified for Europe. But a point that I would make is that whilst their positions were in the lower half of the Swiss Championship, Sion finished sixth and Lugano finished eighth. And there's only 10 teams in the Swiss Championship. Both of them were only 3 points away from a Europa League place. So they're actually not that weak in terms of sides in the Swiss Championship. The Swiss Championship, from what little I know of it, tends to be quite tight, with a lot of teams being sort of roughly at the same level. But the fact that they're so much further along in their pre-season, from Sean's point of view, if we were able to roll up and defeat them quite comprehensively, I would be imagining that come the early part of August, to the mid part of August, you'll suddenly see Inter being an awful lot stronger. One thing that does concern me is Candreva during the match. He's really going through a period where I don't know about Saturday, whether he was on Saturday's performance or not, but today he was really petulant. It was a friendly. It was a friendly. Essentially, is a glorified training session. It's meant to just test the water to see how the team was developing, but he was giving out abuse to the referee. He was shrugging his shoulders. His on-field behaviour just wasn't good. And when you couple that in with the performance he put in training, I don't know how many people have seen it, but there's a clip going on around on Twitter at the moment of him in a training session, and they're basically playing a game of football on a shortened pitch, and a youth player who's been involved in the training has shadowed him out of play, and he's really gone at the youth player. He was looking for the corner. He really went at the youth player. I can't think what the name of the youth player is. But he really went at him. And then later on, he literally barged into the youth player, sending the youth player sort of reeling a little bit backwards. And you've got to factor in that this is a guy who's 30, 31 years of age. He's a fully grown man, and he's using his physical strength against someone who is sort of is bridging that gap between late childhood and early adulthood. And it really doesn't it really doesn't look good. It really doesn't, it really doesn't read well. And one thing that I will remark on is, following the World Cup final, the French television TF1 did a program last night, a 2.5 hour documentary on the French football team that went behind the scenes during the World Cup. And what you got from them was a real sort of camaraderie, that they were there for each other, that they had fun together, that they enjoyed each other's company. But if one of them was in trouble, then they all stood up for that person. And now that we've made such progress since last season, finishing fourth, over the summer with the transfer campaign, you really don't want to see a bad egg in there. And Candreva is really giving the impression at the moment that is what he is. And Spalletti, I think, needs to either get rid of him or stamp it out. I don't know. You watched the Lugano match. Was there any evidence of that there?
Yeah, there was so much evidence to suggest that he was just flat and that he just has a very pessimistic demeanor while he's on the pitch at the moment. I think he definitely started to feel the pressure towards the end of last season, where a lot of commentators and fans started to slap the whole, he hasn't scored a goal yet this season. And then there was that one match against, I think it was it Chievo that we won 5-0 towards the end of last season, or Hellas, or I can't remember when it was, but there was one point where he had a chance right towards the end, and rather than square it back to one of the strikers, he just decided to shoot himself, and I think he hit the post. And you could just tell after the match that he was absolutely livid, despite the fact that we'd won that game 5-0. You could even see Icardi and D'Ambrosio come up to him at the end of the game, laughing with him and like trying to push him around and like to get his morale up, but he doesn't smile at all. So I guess you can see the signs are there that he is more of a self-centered player, and he may be looking out for some more personal glory, especially in these days throughout his career. As you said, he's 30, 31. He's in that point of his career where if he doesn't have some substantial success this season or next season, that'll pretty much be it for him. So if he really wants to compete with us in the Champions League this season, he needs to change both his on-field attitude and his on-field performances, because the incident in training absolutely left me disgusted. I thought it was such a cowardly way to deal with being shadowed out well by a young defender. I think Candreva would have got a lot more respect if he just put two hands in the air and just applauded him and, gave the youth player a bit of a tap on the shoulder, or even a nice little hug around the head like they do in training. That would have served a lot better than running at him into that next challenge, which we all saw may not have been dangerous. It's not like he went 2 feet up on him or anything, but there was definitely a malicious way that he went in. I think he raised his forearms or something as well, just towards the end. So as I said, I haven't seen any of the highlights this morning, but it does not surprise me one bit to hear you say that Candreva was quite possibly our worst performer. I'd have him up there as our number one player to have on our transfer list this season next to João Mario. So yeah, I'd have to agree all around about Antonio's current demeanour and form.
I'm not questioning Spalletti in terms of this, because I do think that we've spoken about how highly we rate him, and I'm sure that he does have that sort of toughness in him. But one thing that struck me watching that documentary last night was that Deschamps really looked after the players. He had a bit of fun with the players. He told the players exactly what he expected, and he told them in no uncertain terms when he felt that they hadn't done themselves justice. But at the same time, he had a lot of crack with the players. He had a lot of enjoyment. He was joking. He was playing around with them at different times when the time was appropriate. But there was one time that the players were messing around the pool table, basically when he expected them to be up in their bedroom. Around the ping pong table, table tennis table. And they were running around, and each one of them was just hitting the ball back, but sort of sprinting around this tennis table. And Deschamps had expected them to be in bed, getting ready for the match the next day. And in that moment, he tore into them. You know, it didn't go any further than basically, come on, we've got a big match tomorrow. This is not how I expect my players to behave. Get to bed and don't let me see you down here again tonight. I really think that Spalletti has to do something similar with Candreva. As I said, either we get shot of him or he gets a serious rap on the knuckles and told that this kind of behaviour isn't acceptable. And I'm 100% confident that Spalletti will do that, but it is something that I would like to see happen. It looks more like João Mario is going to be the first out of the door. Wolves look like they're going to sign him for in and around €27 million. Will you be happy to see him go, Anthony?
Yeah, with such little impact he's had for us over the last 2 seasons, and especially after that match in the Coppa Italia, which I still haven't forgiven him for, where he missed from, I don't know, what was it, 1 centimetre out against Milan. I guess a lot of Inter fans knew that he was on his way out, and because of this, we've already had it in our heads that he's not a member of this squad. So whatever fee is attached to João Mario, I'll see it as an income fee, because in my head, he hasn't been an Inter player from the moment he badmouthed the club at the start of the off-season. So if the 27 million rumoured fee is what is going to be paid by Wolves, then I would be snapping it off straight away. I'm not too sure if we would make a loss or a gain on that. I think our purchase range for João Mario was a fair bit higher. It was around the 40 million mark, around there. But I think he's one player that we definitely need to get off the books. And with that money, we can use to reinvest in another midfielder and another player that we can register for the Champions League. So good to see that he will definitely be on his way. It's just a matter of getting the logistics correct. Yep, off you go.
Yeah, if you look, we kind of know of Inter's accounts. João Mario's value on the books at the moment, which means that Inter will not accept anything less than that, because anything less than that would be a minus Valencia. If we were to get more than that, then it would become a plus Valencia, but I can't see us getting more than that. We'll be lucky to get the 27 million, which is a shame, because I think he's a very talented individual, but he just hasn't cut it at the San Siro. And a lot of talented players have gone to both sides in Milan and not performed in the San Siro or with that pressure on their shoulders, and maybe going to, with all respect to any Wolves fans out there, to a side that the expectation isn't quite as high, and maybe he can go over there and really do a good job, because his talent merits it. We got rid of, it's probably a harsh term, we sold Adair onto Sunning's Chinese team, Jiangsu Sunning, which I think is another positive step forward. I never really had the issue with Adair that a lot of Interisti had, because I always felt that he gave 110%. Yeah. I always felt that it wasn't on a technicality, it wasn't his fault that he performed badly. It was reflective of ability rather than effort. And I would rather have a player that puts in 110% and isn't quite as talented as somebody that only puts in 60 or 70%, but is talented. That said, I do think it's a step forward, because for too long now we've been looking at the Adairs of this world, or even the Palacios of this world, as players to try and dig us out of a hole, and they've never been up to Inter standard. I know Palacio did have a sort of an element of a cult following, but I never felt that he was good enough to take Inter to that next level. Certainly not with Adair. And if we were to get rid of Adair and João Mario, I class that almost as if we were bringing in two decent players, because it allows Spalletti to focus on the players he has, rather than worrying about two individuals that he's never 100% sure what he's going to get out of them. Were you glad to see him go?
In terms of seeing him go, as a person, once again, I never had anything against Adair. I think very similar to what you said about Palacio. I think he was made a little bit of a scapegoat for our poor performances and our poor strategy and technicality in a very dark period of time. And to center a lot of the blame on the centre forward or the striker at the time, it is something that the fans will commonly do. I just think there was so many frustrating games where we would be at 0-0 or 1-1, or we'd even be down a goal. And the only tactical solution, the only viable solution, was to bring on Adair from minute 60 onwards and just hope that he would scrap a goal. And you know what, Andrew? Last season, when Icardi was injured, he actually did score a few vital goals for us. And so you're right, he did give 110%. And for that, I'll always be grateful to Adair. And I was even more happy to see him get almost a hero's welcome at the airport from a fair few fans in China when he landed there. And to see him smiling, it was really good as well. But I would have to agree that if we are going to make that next step forward, that, you know, the Adairs of the team, they know they probably don't have a place in this Inter that is going to be built right now. And yeah, I agree. It means that we should be able to see another one or two players come in. I think it was more expected that Lautaro would be the new Adair this season. But as the time goes on and as the hype train continues to grow, I really think Lautaro is going to play a more fundamental role in this season than Adair has played in his whole time at Inter.
I'm happy for him, because I think that going to a league where the quality is, it can only be lower than the quality in Serie A. We all know that. It's obviously a growing league. It's obviously a league that is improving, and a country that is improving fast in football terms. But it is below the standard that is expected in Italy. And I really think he could go there and make a big impact, and perhaps get some of the adulation that the likes of teammates Perisic, Icardi has enjoyed, and he's had to look at that. He can probably go there and be maybe the big fish in the small pond sort of analogy would work there. The same way as Nagatomo has gone to Turkey and has performed really, really well and is really well liked by Galatasaray fans. That's great to see, because he was somebody who gave 110% all the time, but his ability didn't allow him to just make that next grade up in his performance. But now that he's in a league where the Turkish league is obviously very important, the Turkish league is strong in its own right, and there's some massive clubs there, but its standard is slightly below the Italian league, and it's good to see him going there and making an impact as well. In terms of the transfers coming in, everything is quite slow at the moment. The focus is on sort of transferring players out, which is understandable after the amount of money that has been spent on the likes of Nainggolan and the various players that have been brought in earlier in the summer. I suppose the next thing to look at is the World Cup. I felt, there's a certain bias in my opinion, probably. So I'll let Anthony give a better judgment, more neutral judgment on it. I felt the best team won. I felt I felt France were very likely to win it from the outset. And I think Mbappe has really exploded onto the world stage now. But as I said, there's a bias on my part, so I'm going to let Anthony give you the neutral's point of view.
No, I'd say there's a bias on my part as well, except a bias in the other direction of being with Italian parents. I've always had very close ties to the Azzurri, maybe even a bit more than I do to the Socceroos. So seeing France win, it always goes against naturally what I like to see as an Italian fan and an Azzurri fan. But I said it from the first game of the World Cup, France are the best side. They have the perfect side for this manager's strategic setup and the formation. And they really did not look like they got out of second gear throughout the whole group stage. They were a team where even if they looked like they were in a slight amount of trouble at some point, they were able to gather themselves mentally. And as you mentioned before previously in the podcast, it looked like a really tight-knit group of players together. And after watching all of their performances in the match, it actually reminded me of the World Cup in 2006, 12 years ago, where in almost every match, Italy did not have the most possession. They would just play 100% on the counter, but they had the perfect outlet players for that system to work. The defense was quite solid, and the group that was together at that point in time were very, very close-knit, which was bizarre considering the whole situation that was going on in Italy. Half the team didn't know where they'd be playing next season. So I think everything in that French team this year resembles a championship World Cup winning side, from the defense to the coach to the strength and mental tenacity of the team and everything else that you mentioned in this podcast about the French team. I'd also say that, not to take anything away from them, but there were obviously some countries that did underperform and didn't really have a chance to get as far into the tournament as they would have liked. But that's just the way the World Cup went. And if anything, it was a good thing because we saw the emergence of some great generations of players and some great countries. It was so good to see the fans of Belgium and Croatia welcome them home like the heroes that they were. I thought it was all really, really good, to be honest.
And one thing that will stick with me is and I think it was obviously true in 1998. I'm a bit older than you, I think, so I might have a stronger recollection of the 98 French World Cup winning team. But the sort of Black Blanc Bear thing going on of really looking at the modern France and the way that the different ethnicities are all mixing to make a much stronger French team than has often been the case in the past. It was really, really positive, and I'd really like to kind of refer to looking at the French fans. It was really good to see that not all of them were dressed in the sort of blue of France or carrying the blue, white and red flag. there were people there that were just as passionately following France, but they had an Algerian flag, they had a Moroccan flag, a Tunisian flag, and were very proud of their own heritage, but also the fact that they were part of the new modern France. And I think that was really an image that stuck with me. And I think it was true of Belgium as well, because both countries have had issues in recent years that we're not going to go. This is a sports podcast after all. We're not going to go into those. Everybody is aware of what they are, but really just show both the sort of more traditional French, if you like, with the new French, or the more traditional Belgian with the new Belgian, and the fact that everybody was welcome to support Belgium or France in their own way. Also on the Champs-Élysées after the semi-final and after the final, the same thing. People in the blue and with the French flag, but also people there with flags of their own heritage and their own background, but really enjoying the fact that they also represent France and they are French, and the victory was as much theirs as it was anybody else's, and I think it's a really real positive thing to see. As I said, particularly after the difficulties of the last couple of years that those countries have enjoyed. I don't know, did you pick up on any of that?
Yeah, absolutely, I did. I can't remember which Belgian player it was. It might have been Romelu Lukaku, who I must say had a fantastic tournament. I really do rate him as an attacker. If he can just improve that first touch slightly, I think he's got the overall capacity to be a world-class physical finisher all round. But I think it was him. I really do think it was him that came out and said, in an interview, I think it might have been after the first group game, that he said, "You, me, everybody here, we are all Belgium. We're all together, and everyone here can support Belgium if they want to." And you'll see that as a reflection in our fans. If you look at our fans, you'll see that we are all Belgium, and we encourage everyone to support us and everybody else. So I think that there was a really good positive shift in mentality and respect in this World Cup. And I think it came to a surprise to a lot of people, because I think it was built up as a tournament where a lot of fans would get involved for more negative reasons. I think hooliganism was a big fear, especially with certain sectors of fans. But I think it was controlled really well. And all I could see was just fans flooding the streets and the squares, really enjoying it. And I tell you what, it really makes me want to experience a World Cup at some point in my life. It has to be done.
Yeah, I'd love to myself as well. And it's just, I think it's obviously you've spoken of the fact that you are an Australian, but you're also of Italian heritage. Your parents are Italians, and the pride in both of those nationalities, backgrounds, and cultures. The same thing is true of myself. I'm a proud Welshman, and I've spoken about different aspects of Welsh football in the podcast going back over the last couple of months. But my heritage is Irish, and I could appreciate that from my own point of view. That, yeah, whilst I'm an extremely proud Welshman, I'm also very proud of my Irish heritage, and I just think and as you said, people were expecting, okay, this is Russia, it's going to be really negative, there's going to be a lot of hooliganism, there's going to be a lot of racism. There wasn't a bit of it, and it really must go down as one of the best organised World Cups in history, I would imagine. And it was just delightful to see, really. Coming to the end of the show now, just before we sign off, we are running the poll for Inter's all-time 11. We're running a poll on Twitter every week, and people are voting in their favourite player for each particular position. Last week's poll was Mediani, and it produced a really surprising result. There were three candidates: Lele Ariali, Diego Simeone and Javier Zanetti, and both Anthony and I were bowled over by the result, because it was something that we just really weren't expecting. No, I'm joking. Zanetti won with 95% of the vote. I think it's the most clear-cut one that we've run, and I think we were expecting from the outset that it would be the most clear-cut one. So congratulations to Il Capitano, and I'll sign off with Forza Inter.
Thanks for having me again, Andrew, and thanks for all that are listening. Until next week, Forza Inter.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.